How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Talk 4 podcast. So excited to have you here today and show you this fantastic episode. Just want to say quickly that episodes like this one and all the ones before and the ones in future are made possible by people who subscribe. Hopefully, just like you. I'm going to ask you today if you can leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a rating, leave a like or a comment, and just support the show in the little ways that you can like that. It makes a huge difference on my end. And quickly, just want to plug as well. I've taken 30 of the best episodes of this podcast and turned them into a fantastic book that goes into 150 secrets to greatness. Each one of those 30 episodes gets crunched down into 5 of the best key takeaways from the whole talk and turns them into a fantastic book. Highly recommend you check it out. Please support the show by grabbing a copy, either a paperback or an ebook. And I can't wait to show you guys this one today. So guys, without further ado, let's get over to the episode. How's it going, guys? Welcome to episode 138 of Talk 4, the Quickfire podcast, where we ask 4 great questions to unique and interesting people behind the mic. Today is your host, Skupien. That's me. Let me introduce an absolutely incredible guest for today. Eric Doyle is going to be answering these questions today. So, Eric, we had the best pre-podcast talk, sharing some of our connections and stuff, but let's introduce you then. So just quickly, how you doing today? Welcome to the show. Absolutely honored.
I'm honored as well. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I know. I'm glad to be here. This is going to be such a great podcast. I'm super thrilled about it. And let's just introduce you to everyone so we get everyone on the same page and just make sure everyone knows just how incredible you are and the things that you're doing are. So we always have a kind of 1 minute to 2 minute elevator pitch at the start of each episode, just introducing yourself and a little bit about your day job and a kind of an intro snapshot into the life of you. So yeah, give us a couple of minutes of what you've got going on, and then we'll jump into those questions. It's going to be great.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. Again, my name is Eric Doyle. My call sign's Popeye. I'm a naval aviator, retired after 25 years in the U.S. Navy. I flew mostly F-18s. It's kind of my dream job to fly single-seat fighters with the U.S. Navy. I had some great opportunities through my career at TOPGUN. Got to do some flying with the Air Force and the F-22 Raptor, and got a command tour with one of your former guests, Brian Shrum. I worked for him as his XO, so on the West Coast flying F-18s, both Legacy and Super Hornets, and again cruising on the West Coast. And then after that tour, had the distinct privilege of joining the Blue Angels to be the commanding officer and flight leader. So I had a great career in the U.S. Navy. And since retirement, I joined a company called RAVN Aerospace here in Houston, Texas. We're part of the commercial air services industry. We primarily focus on our customers with the DoD, so U.S. Air Force, U.S. Navy, U.S. Marine Corps. We fly retired military aircraft. Our company flies the British Hawk, so near and dear to your heart, I'm sure. We have some L-39s, but we've really grown our fleet of BAE Hawks and really enjoy that aircraft. Since joining RAVN a little over 4 years ago, I've become the CEO, and our company's really grown in the last few years. It's really great to be a part of the industry in the commercial air services industry. A lot of great partners out there doing some pretty amazing work, innovative and important work for DoD and other important customers.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Looking at all the stuff that you've obviously done, but also the stuff that you're doing now is so impactful. And yeah, I have to say, massive shout out to all those guys. I know that we mentioned a few of them there, like Brian, but also the other guys that we know. I'm sure there's more that we didn't even speak about, but everyone from Fizzle to Wiz to Intake, all these great people. And they've all got such great backstories and careers. And I just want to hear yours today. That's where we start with this. And that's where we really start to lay those groundworks out for talking about what you're up to now, basically how it's all come about and just this fantastic career you've had then. So if we dig into the backstory a bit and kind of, yeah, look at where it all came from, the passion and everything, looking at everything you've done, obviously very decorated Navy pilot, you stepped into leadership at RAVN Aerospace recently. Take us through your journey then. So starting from the early days in the Navy, and even before that, just what got you inspired, what pushed you towards getting in, and how that's kind of shaped your leadership approach in the military and now in the civilian aerospace.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one I enjoy speaking about. And then, since I knew what flying was, I wanted to do it. My dad was a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, and again, there's pictures of me being held next to F5s and F4s as a young kid, barely could walk. I was around airplanes at a very young age. And I grew up around that. I grew up around the Air Force. I grew up around aviation, and I knew, again, like I said, since I knew what it was, I wanted to do it. And the funny thing about that is, I actually more specifically wanted to be a U.S. Air Force pilot. And as a pretty long story, probably longer for the podcast, but as I went through the application process, I actually ended up applying to the Navy as well as a backup. And as I went through the process, because I really, most importantly, passionately wanted to fly, and I went through the process, and at some point along the way, I ended up having acceptances to both. So both the Air Force flying slot to go to OTS and pilot training, and a Navy flying spot to go to OCS and pilot training on the Navy side. And I'm not sure why to this day I picked what I picked. I really think it's mostly divine intervention, but I picked the Navy after spending a lot of years wanting to be an Air Force pilot. I ended up picking Navy, and it worked out great. And the other really great thing about my career, at least for me personally, is the opportunities I had to work with the Air Force, and something I grew up with doing, or being around the Air Force. So that was really rewarding. And, it can be a little, I don't know, intimidating to go to another service when you spent so much time in one where you're going over to a different thing and learning something new. But what was amazing about that time is I got to fly some amazing airplanes and did some amazing work, but working with the people. And I quickly found out that all the Air Force pilots I flew with, they're just like all the Navy guys and girls I've worked with, or the Marine Corps guys and girls I've worked with. They're all cut from the same cloth, and you quickly sync up really quickly and operate. It was great. So again, the passion started at a very young age, and I held on to that passion and continued. There was a couple roadblocks along the way, but I always kept trying, and slowly but surely, I found myself flying an F-18, which is pretty amazing.
You want to divulge a little bit on what some of those roadblocks may have been? Because I've found that some of the stories that I've had on here and some of the people who've spoken on here have had really great stories of adversity, or they've gone down maybe like the wrong path and had a mentor or someone who guided them, and then they've gone on to have these like incredible careers. So I guess, what was really challenging for you there, and what did you have to overcome to get to where you are today? I think it's quite inspiring to look back.
Yeah, I think everybody has, whether they be big or small hurdles, there's a lot along the way. I think the important thing is never take no for an answer. There's always a way. There's always a path, and never give up. And I think that was part of the things I saw early on in my application process, where it's purposely built to be hard to get through for a lot of reasons. They kind of downplay your abilities. And I think part of that process, whether it's overtly that way or not, it's meant to test your resolve, and if you really want something. And I don't think there's a story out there of someone that's been successful where everything was just cream cheese the whole way. They just kind of walked the path and got all these great things. It's hard work, and I think one of the very important things in all this is it's important to do hard things, challenge yourself. And you see that in a long career in the military, where you spend 10, 15, 20 years flying one airplane, and over that time in the military, you build rank. And it can be easy to stay in that comfortable, easy path where as you build rank, it naturally in the military, it gets a little bit harder for people to critique you. A lot of times, people within your chain of command are the ones that are the instructors, and that can be awkward if you don't force that learning environment where you can kind of just sit there and fly a little bit and not challenge yourself to do hard things. So it gets harder and harder to do hard things because you get in this comfortable position of making rank and getting into command, and most people just want to let the boss do what he wants to do, but that's not really the path to success.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. And looking at the career that you've had, there's a couple of big names there which are notorious for exactly what you just said, really pushing that and not getting comfortable, not being able to sit on your hands and really making you the best version of you that you can be. So that all starts really at Top Gun, doesn't it then? So you got an F-18, you pushed through those hurdles and you got the yes, and you got in the sea of a hornet. So how does that lead to Top Gun then? Talk to me about that. And I would love to know a little bit about your time as an instructor there. What was most rewarding about that? And how did it kind of start to influence and, I guess, develop your leadership and kind of, yeah, just those morals that would then lead you to the Blues?
Yeah, Top Gun was and is an amazing experience for me. It molded me as a person and as a leader. I think I've learned more about my experience as a Top Gun instructor the years past. When you're in it, you're working 8 days a week, 25 hours a day, and just trying to keep up. And I think you miss, in a lot of things when you're that busy and working that hard. And an organization like that is very high functioning, and you miss the significance of the moment sometimes. So it's important to kind of take a pause and realize what you're doing and where you are. But then it doesn't stop. Get back to work, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit ago, where you do all that work, you get your wings, you get an F-18, you sit down in the seat, but it's not over. There's more to do. There's more training. There's always something you're working hard to get to the next thing, get to the next qualification. And for me, Top Gun, I think a lot of us in this industry, or at least a lot of people that humble leaders, some of the ones that you've interviewed, a lot of us, I think it's kind of whether it's fair or not, you have a little bit of the imposter syndrome. And I never really aspired to be a Top Gun instructor per se. I just kind of felt like that was something for the real tactical guys, or not for me. And but we had a sister squad when I was in VFA 115 in my first tour. Our sister squadron was VFA 25, and they were loaded with Top Gun instructors, Top Gun graduates, and Top Gun instructors. And we were pretty thin in our squadron. We'd gone through the Super Hornet transition while I was there, and just based on manual requirements, we were thin on Top Gun graduates while I was there. But I really enjoyed spending time around those guys, and I noticed it. I remember we're in a course called SFARP, where it's the beginning of workups to go on deployment. And SFARP is where the local weapons school runs you through the paces. You do flying and ground school classes you kind of get up to speed on the latest and greatest and get back up on the steps so you're tactical and ready to go on deployment. And I remember watching, so you go through the courses and air to ground employment, air to air employment, all the different systems you operate in. And no matter the subject of the lecture, anytime one of the former Top Gun instructors were asked a question, it wasn't just that they knew the answer to the question, they knew why the question was being asked. They knew all the caveats and the assumptions and the reasons why. It wasn't just yes or no or true or false. They gave a pretty deep narrative on the question that was being asked. And I just remember being awestruck by the professionalism and the depth of knowledge from those guys, just a few that I interacted with. And I realized then that I wanted that. I wanted to be, and it was in all walks of life. It wasn't just their tactical knowledge, it's how they taught, which was incredible. They were amazing teachers, and they could break things down to your level, whatever level you were at. And their goal was to bring you up, raise you up, and make you better, bring you with them. It wasn't about how good they were, which they were good for sure, but you're a Top Gun instructor, and you're first and foremost a teacher. And going back to your question about what formed me going forward as a leadership perspective, it was teaching. And I really think that's the bottom line with an instructor at Top Gun or any place like that. And for all of us really is the motivation that I got out of teaching. And I didn't know it was there. I didn't know that was something that was gonna. I thought I was gonna go to Top Gun and learn how to fly an F-18 to the edge of the envelope, as it were. And we did do that. And I got my level of knowledge in the F-18 and my ability to fly the airplane was head and shoulders above where I was in the fleet. But what I really learned was how to teach. And that was phenomenal. And then I carried that forward into everything I do.
Yeah, I would love to. I've got so many great questions I'd like to ask, but I think the most important one to get into on that really is then, I guess, what did you learn about teaching there then? I mean, I know that's a massive topic and a massive question, but I mean, what are some of those big ones that you picked up there that you took away? Because one of my former guests was the former commander of Top Gun, actually, Tom Trotter, and we were speaking about the meaning
Mhm.
of Top Gun, the what it is, or yeah, it's not flying jets and getting good and stuff. It's a far deeper reason than that. And what I kind of want to ask as a backup to that too, really, is just obviously Top Gun is about raising the entire level of the Navy's flying, basically by creating instructors who would then go back to their squadrons and then share those lessons and then increase and elevate that level. So, how did you take those lessons of leadership you learned there in teaching, and then how are you applying that back at your squadron when you left from Top Gun as well?
Yeah. It's not when you go through Top Gun, and I think most understand this, but it's not like the movie where it's who's going to win the course. It isn't that. It's really if you graduate or not. And I think a lot of us that went through the course, there was always you had good flights and bad flights, and you probably felt like, man, I'm here for maybe one more day, and they're going to kick me out of here. But it was about graduating. And when I did graduate and became an instructor, I was on the other side. You have students, some do well, some do okay. And unfortunately, some have to go home, maybe to come back another day. And again, what the goal is to bring up the level of effort, provide a graduate level study in air-to-air employment, air-to-ground employment, and strike fighter aviation. And so there's a bar that has to be met for a graduate, both performance in the classroom and in the air. But at the same time, you're trying to grow a teacher. And and I saw while I was there, not the difference, but how those two work together. And I remember very specifically, we had a student that was struggling. He had had a lot of, I think he was a Marine and he had a JTAC tour, so he had a little bit of time out of the cockpit. He was trying to get back up to speed, and he was a little behind just from a proficiency standpoint. And he was struggling in the air, and there's not a lot of time to catch up in that course because it just goes, goes, goes. And and we're working with him, and I remember the motivation for a lot of us to get him through the course because he was such a good person and a good teacher. You could see it right out of the outset that he was very good at identifying what went right, what went wrong, and what we could do next time to fix it. And that was really it was kind of a moment for me that you don't have to be the best pilot in the airplane to be a good teacher. You have to understand. You have to be a uh, humble leader, approachable, credible. You have to be own your mistakes, not be afraid to highlight what you did wrong, and then that's a crucial part of teaching. And and so it's those two things. You have a bar that you need to meet to be an instructor to graduate the course, but you also want someone to be a good person. At the end of the day, if you're being taught by somebody, if you don't like them, you're not going to listen to them. That's just the reality of the matter. And so you need to be a little bit likable. You need to be approachable. You need to be good in the jet and learn how to teach.
I agree. Quick ad break here, guys. Just want to introduce you to Shopify. Shopify is the all-in-one e-commerce platform that runs basically everything I'm doing, from my personal website to my business websites. It truly is a phenomenal system, and I have a way for you guys to get started today for just £1 building your business, whether that's personal brand, whether that's e-commerce, whether that's a blog. It has everything. It has its own app store that can get you basically every feature you could expect from an online store, and it really just works out of a fantastic all-in-one system, which I can only highly recommend enough. And you guys can start for just £1 today. It's an incredible offer. absolutely amazing. And the link to that is in the bio, or I'll put it up in the tab at the top. I think it'll be top right at the screen for you guys right now. So yeah, guys, check it out. Make sure to get this offer and yeah, get started. It's fantastic. I agree. I completely agree. So after Top Gun, you obviously left Top Gun, you had that experience and you had that leadership. And then obviously somewhere down the line, you would go to another place that would teach you a whole nother spectrum of that sort of leadership in the Blue Angels. But rewinding from there just a little bit before we get into that, I would just love to cover what your career looked like going out of Top Gun, and then as well, if you can lace into it, how did you start to implement those things into the general squadron of non-Top Gun students as well?
Yeah, that's another again another lesson I think I learned a little bit after the fact. And Top Gun is it's a really unique environment. At least it's there are some very high functioning individuals there. And I remember while I was there thinking, God, if outside of the military, you get a few of these folks together, you could dominate, and that place would dominate regardless. So you get used to that level of execution, both in the air, on the ground, administratively, and everything you do there is to the the nth degree. And you have to meter that a little bit. When you get back to the fleet, you don't have that environment necessarily to work in because there's a lot of commitments. You're on the road, you're deploying, you're going out to sea, you're doing FCLPs, getting ready to go out to the ship. And so you have to balance that. And you have to learn how to be efficient with your time, efficient with debriefs. And you've got a whole gamut of students out there, some that just came out of the fleet replacement squadron. You've got commanding officers, executive officers, you've got air wing commanders, maybe even the strike group admiral, that you have this whole purview of not necessarily students, but folks that fly in your squadron. And you have to be able to, again, know your audience and how much time you have to fly and debrief and other commitments going on. So you want to smartly raise the bar of that squadron or that air wing while managing all of the other commitments going on out there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, have you found a way to implement some of those Top Gun leadership things? And you talk about environment. I guess before we get into the Blue Angels, and then obviously we're going to finish out with a bit of what you're doing right now with RAVN, but were you able to find a way to implement and create that sort of a team environment and that sort of a structure or that feeling, that vibe that you got in Top Gun within what you're doing now? So within the civilian aerospace, like as we know, you're the CEO. Does it feel like it did to some degree, like it did at Top Gun? And how are you sort of implementing what you felt from there into what you're doing now? Because obviously in the military, you probably have a bit less control, but now you probably have a bit more leeway to pick and choose your people and how you run the ship, basically, I guess.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and that's what's great about our industry. And I'll take the question and kind of fast forward a little bit to where we are now, and then maybe go back. But that's what's motivating about the industry that we're in now is there's a lot of people like myself in the commercial air services industry doing adversary air. And you spend 25 years in the military and whichever service you were in, there's a lot of innovative leaders out there that see ways they want to get things done. And you have this opportunity now where that you wanted things that you wanted to do, whether it be a Top Gun or the Blues or in the fleet or in the CAF, and you can bring those years of lessons learned and get efficient with that, and bring effects to the customer, which is that active duty member right now. So you can take all those little tools that we've built over the years, whether it be a Top Gun or Blues or the Air Force Weapons School, the 422, and you can take those little tidbits and take the perfect little pieces out of those. And I don't think it would be smart to try to replicate Top Gun or replicate the Blue Angels at RAVN Aerospace, but I 100% take components of that out. Things that I learned at Top Gun and in the Blues, or time I spent in the Air Force. And there's a lot of wisdom out there in all of those experiences. And you try to find the best tools in that toolbox and implement them.
Could you share a couple of those? What do you feel like are some of the, or a couple of the best elements of all of that that you've implemented that you feel like have given you that massive step up in the career and within the organization, do you think?
Yeah, I would say that, my keys to success really kind of comes down to three things: being humble, owning your mistakes, and being optimistic. And um, I go back to you've probably seen the image of a Blue Angel with his helmet on, a visor down in the cockpit. And that's a pretty iconic image with that reflective visor and the boom mic and the gold helmet. And the funny thing is, while I was on the team, and I'm sure this happened to many team members, that you'll meet somebody in the crowd or at a commit, and they'll tell you a story about, I was at a show in 1995 at such and such place, and they'll ask if you were there. And I only did 2 years on the team as the boss in 2018 and 19. I was not even in the Navy in 1995, just entering the Navy. So that's that image of the humility that you see in the team. Is just enduring that. All of those. It's not about the person behind the visor, under the helmet. It's about the team. And in that humble approach, again, being a servant leader, putting the organization and your people first, and you second, is something that I hold on to for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to look at the Blue Angels now because we're kind of teetering into that area of all of this now and how that all came about. But as you kind of mentioned, there's a lot of, hard to tell the difference between the years. That level of quality, that whole thing, that even just the look of all of it, the jets, it all kind of just carries on, and that standard keeps going. But that's no small standard. That's a very
Mm-hmm.
high standard. So there's this pair of boots that you've got to fill, specialist number one, which is just huge. So I guess for me, that kind of feels like being, I had a great career as a tennis player. It almost is kind of being okay, so now you've got this job and you need to step into Roger Federer's tennis shoes. And actually, Roger Federer's tennis shoes have been filled for the last, God knows how many years. And you got to keep that standard and look exactly the same. So that's pretty scary to have to do that. But I guess talk to me about all of it then. So the selection,
Yeah.
getting in, what was going through your head and how you approached all of it.
Yeah, scary, nervous. Those are absolutely correct feelings going into that. And it all started with the interview process, putting the application. I mean, just that in that moment of putting in my application, just knowing that I was even eligible, or I was in the hunt to even apply, was like, wow, that's pretty neat. After spending my life trying to get into a cockpit and watching, many programs and documentaries and, Van Halen music videos about the Blue Angels. And then to just have an application in for the Navy Flight Demonstration Squadron that was pretty cool, to be honest. And then going to the finalist week in Pensacola, where I spent a lot of time with the team and with the board that did the interviews. And going into that interview, I went to Pensacola with this mindset that, well, I'm going to throw my name in the hat. I'm not going to get too worried about it. We'll see what happens. Spend some time with some friends, and the other finalists and to this day are still all good friends of mine. And it was a great week, but I'll tell you, as soon as I walked in the door, if you will, to Pensacola and saw the team and watched practice, man, the wave of the nerves just took over. I was so excited to be there, and I knew that as much as I thought I was going to try to keep it cool and just see what happens, I wanted it really bad. I
Yeah.
wanted it really bad, and it was a fun week. And the interview, walking into the interview, that was another hard thing, to prep for. And in a little over 20 years in the Navy at that point, I hadn't really interviewed for anything in a long time. And I did a lot of interview prep. I had some friends, that outside of the military that, worked in different industries that I did some mock interviews with on Zoom. And that's hard. It's hard to prepare for that. And then, talk about it's about, it's that, you want to stay in your comfort space, or do you want to go do hard things? And that was putting yourself out there. It was hard. There was walk into a room with admirals and former team members, former bosses, and it's just you and your khakis and being interviewed. It was intimidating. It was hard to prepare for, and again, another hard situation. But walking in that door and that interview, if you could ever explain an interview as being fun, it was after I got through the first question. We talked about leadership and flying, and it was actually semi enjoyable because I'm very passionate about that. And I think whether you're on a podcast or interview, if you just speak from the heart, it's not going to be that hard.
Yeah, I completely feel you there, and that's what I've found too. It's when you can speak from the heart, as you said, that's when the great stuff comes out, and that's what I've found in this podcast too. It's the best guests, and my favorite episodes have always been those ones where people, are not afraid to kind of, just come out with it really and be open and
Yeah.
just really talk about their truth. I think that's really important. Not put on any kind of a face of whatever, just be open, honest, and share that experience and that leadership and that wisdom that they picked up. And that's why I think the show does really well. It's because people are so willing to pass on that knowledge, and I think that's a fantastic thing. And obviously, as you can see it here, massive aviation fan, and if you haven't guessed it already, I love the Blue Angels. We've got a big picture up there. So I got to ask you, you went from flying the Hornet in the the general Navy basically, and obviously lots and lots of flying there. First time you got out in a Blue Angels jet, other than the tech specs that we know that are a bit different, like there's a slightly tighter spring in the throttle, and the not the throttle, the joystick, and a few small things. Did it feel special? Did it feel different? What was the Blue Angels jet like the first time you flew it, other than the fact that obviously it's slick and doesn't have any fuel tanks and stuff?
Yeah, from the basic performance standpoint of a plane like it, an F-18C, the performance is pretty phenomenal. But you feel that in other planes. So the planes we flew at Top Gun were always slick, and you fly them in cold weather, and those were high performing aircraft. So there is that. But beyond that, just walking up to a blue and gold airplane for the first time is, again, kind of intimidating. And then, yeah, it's different. When you sit down in the airplane, it's an F-18. There are the little differences, whether it be the smoke system, the inverted fuel pumps, the spring, the clock, stopwatch on there. A few little things that are different, and they kind of look awkward. But if you're just getting in an F-18 like that by yourself to go flying, it's not that big a deal because you're not looking at the blue paint and those switches you get used to in a few minutes. But what's very, very different is the way you fly the plane, the procedures, whether it be how you start up, how you walk to the jet, how you fly the jet, is vastly different. And my first flights in a blue jet in training, I felt like a brand new pilot again. I felt like I'd never flown the F-18 before, because the procedures are just different in the way you fly, and on a spring, and the comm. There's a lot of comm coming out of boss's mouth, and there's a lot of procedures that you have to learn, and it's all very timely. A minute from start, you're already on the radio talking and doing pre-flight checks, and at 4 minutes and 4 seconds, you're taxiing. And if you're not ready to go at 4 minutes and 4 seconds, you're not going to be, because once you're on the spring and taxiing, there's not a lot of time to move around. You're strapped down into that seat with the gunner's belt. You got the spring on the stick, and you're pretty much talking, as boss at least, on the radio for the rest of the flight. So if you've got something else going on in the cockpit, or something you need to troubleshoot, or something's not stowed in the right place, it's hard to get a hold of. So it's very different.
I mean, it sounds like a whole load of fun to me. And then obviously from there, then you became the CEO and you were the boss, and then you took over. And one name that we both know quite well that we spoke about before we got on the show, Astro, who joined the Thunderbirds, took that assignment and had to essentially kind of reverse the team really and find the problems, and because of bad history and everything, and then go and implement changes, and now look how well they're doing, kind of a thing. So I got to ask, coming into the Blue Angels role there, Was there anything that you felt needed to change, or was there anything that maybe if changed is a bit of a strong word for something that's so good like the Blues? What were you implementing in your own leadership style and things that you picked up along the way to either improve or optimize that team? Do you feel?
Yeah, I think, it starts with, something you're used to in the military, with any of the services, you're always turning over. You're always training, you're always learning, you're always moving to the next job. So you may be the commanding officer or squadron commander of a squadron in any of the services. Your time is limited and there's someone waiting to come take your spot and somebody after that. So you're always implementing new leadership styles. You're always training new people where we have continuing to, it's just a pipeline of new pilots coming in. They get trained, they spend their time in, and then they eventually retire. So you're always training, you're always learning, and you're always implementing, you're always trying to move the ball down the field. You're always trying to raise the bar, do the next thing. And something that the team and the boss prior to me that implemented was a demonstration manual, very thorough, kind of like a NATOPS or a -1 that just described the way the demo went. It's basically mine's on the shelf over here, and it's all tabbed out. The first one I had with notes and highlighting all over the thing, and it's a cherished part of my library. So we took that's just an example of things. You're always trying to make the demo better. You're trying to improve your debrief capability, and always just make the demo better, make the team better. You're always trying to enhance your engagement with the community because you come to your town for 3-4 days, and it's like bringing away a window into the Navy Marine Corps to a town, let everyone look through it and see the amazing things that happen in the Navy Marine Corps. And you only have a few days to do it, and you want to make the most out of those engagements. So you want the demo to go well, you want the flying to go well, but you also want the community engagements to go well. And so you're always trying to move that bar and always trying to move the ball down the field, as it were. The other thing about being a CEO, and you mentioned this about Astro, is you got to balance your CEO job and your flight leader job, and sometimes they have to be very segregated. And as a flight leader and as a pilot, especially in my first year, I devoted I put a lot of faith and confidence into the team members that had been there before me. My number 2, the right wingman, he was my training officer. I put all my faith and confidence into him. At the end of the debrief, he was the last one to speak. He was the instructor. He had half the experience in the Navy and half the experience I had in the F-18, but he had a wealth of experience, relatively speaking, compared to me in the Blue Angels. And so I listened to every word he had, and he's still an important person in my life to this day. But when that debrief ended, I had to do the commanding officer part, and that's something that Damon wasn't a part of, and nor would he try to be. And you had to do that sort of thing. And I know Astro had challenges in that aspect, but we all do. At the end of the day, it's just a bunch of human beings that are trying to get through the day in a squadron, and you still have to lead as a commanding officer. And that's what's great in the Blues. At least they allow us to have our first 05 command tour where you learn a lot of that stuff. And I think by the time you finish that command tour, you actually feel ready, and then you turn over. And so at least you've had one rep under your belt where you've dealt with some of that leadership challenges as a CO, and then you can apply that stuff to the Blues, where you definitely have to, manage that time, because especially your first year, you're spending a lot of time focusing on the demo and learn how to fly it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it looks like a great time. I mean, you must have learned so much there that's then gone and applied itself into everything you're doing now. And we will transition out of the Blues and go into Raven. But before we do that, I would just like to give you the opportunity to share any great stories or any moments or things that really stuck with you from the Blues. So before we get out of that topic and go into what you're doing now, just anything in there that really stuck with you, great flights, great interactions, or just a moment that really surmised exactly what you were doing then, the effect you were having. Yeah, feel free to tell us a story if you have one to share.
Yeah. I'll go back to you. You mentioned the interview process, and to answer, that's a tough question, by the way. I get asked that a lot. What was your favorite demo? What was your favorite location? And so many great ones. San Francisco is amazing. The image of flying inverted over the San Francisco Bay with the Golden Gate Bridge in your HUD while you're upside down, and boat masts whizzing by, smoke on, and probably a million people ish watching. Uh, that's an image that will be forever ingrained in my mind, and it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
hard to imagine that here I am inverted over the San Francisco Bay, and I am not going to go to jail for this. So this is it's actually occurred.
It's pretty hard to top.
Uh, yeah, those are very special experiences in the air. On the ground, more importantly than all the flying was all the engagements with so many different people, the opportunities to affect someone's life, and take a moment, especially with the kids. That's phenomenal. And I'll go back to the interview process when and I think it's the kind of the example. I really kind of set the tone for me and reminded me of where I was and how I got there. And it was certainly a lot of hard work on my part to get to where I was, but there was a lot of help along the way. The support network for any one service member is very vast, whether it be family, friends, or other service members. There's a lot of people behind the scenes helping you do what you do and get you to where you are. So when you thank somebody for their service, think about everybody below the tip of that iceberg too, because it's pretty significant. So when I was going in for the finalist interview, we did it at the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola. Beautiful morning, nice and quiet, nobody in the museum. It hadn't opened yet. And of course, I'm very nervous, but as I walked around the airplane to the museum, that nervousness kind of faded away because it's just a beautiful museum and there's light music playing, and seeing all the World War II aircraft, walking on this flight deck in the museum there. It was great. It's very kind of soothing as I prepared for that interview. A moment of kind of calm in the storm. And as I'm walking around the museum, I noticed that my steps felt weird. Something was wrong with the floor, and I come to realize that my shoes were disintegrating. You may have heard other stories in the past where uniform shoes, you don't wear them very often. A lot of times they get stored in a box, or you walk on a flight deck with them once, you put them in a box, and they have a tendency to fall apart if you're not paying
No
attention.
way. Not before
And
your interview.
I am minutes from my interview, and it's like God said, "Are you had your moment of calm? I'm gonna ratchet it up again for you." So my shoes started literally coming apart, not just little pieces, but the entire heel disintegrated. And now
This
I'm
is
kind of walking on my
brilliant.
toes in the middle of this beautiful museum, leaving a trail of debris around
That's
the museum.
great.
So I was mortified. I was like, what am I going to do? Because everything in that moment is amplified, and of course, the interviewers don't care, but I don't think that in the moment. I think everything is extremely important. So I go over and sit down in this little area we were waiting to interview, and the interviews are in alphabetical order. So Do, was Jeff Germany, my good friend, went first, and I went second. And he had just come out, and I walk up like T-Bell, my shoes just came apart. What am I going to do? He's like, here you go, sit down. He took the shoes off his feet, gave me his shoes, and then he took my tore up shoes and managed to get out to the car, went to the NAX, bought more shoes, and brought them back. And it was almost the perfect crime because we'd swapped shoes, and just as we were finishing swapping, one of the former bosses, Tom Frosch, walks by, goes to the bathroom prior to my interview, and looks down at us. What are you guys doing? But the fact that there's six of us there, we all grew up together. At one point, Jeff was my roommate in pilot training. We deployed together. We were teammates, squadron mates, and then here we are, kind of competing against each other for this prized position to be the boss of Blue Angels. And his first motivation was to give me his shoes, not to find a way to create an advantage for himself. That it was that bond that we all have, and he helped me get through that interview. It was, whether or not they looked at my shoes, it provided calm in my mind and got me through the interview. And so I think back to that. That was a defining moment for me in the process, and something I like to tell that story a lot.
How's it going, guys? Just want to really quickly introduce you to a brand called Aviate. Aviate are an aviation-inspired watch company that create incredible commemorations for legendary aircraft and new aircraft too, doing epic projects right now, making these fantastic watches that represent different things. And I am delighted to be working with them. I have some of their watches. They've sent a few out. They're fantastic. And I've got a very special 20% off discount code for you off a full-priced watch. So, guys, I'm going to put it on the screen now. So go and grab yourself a very cool watch. They're really awesome. And if you can't find a link on the screen right now, they'll be in the description too. So guys, go and use that code and see you there. I like that story too. And what I'm taking from that is that actually, if he had done what you said and he had gone and, made the wrong decision essentially, and not being a team player and not being honorable and hadn't helped you out or hadn't honored that brotherhood you guys had, he wouldn't have been the right fit for the CEO of the Blue Angels ultimately, would he? Actually, that's probably why he was a great candidate, because he would be willing to do stuff like that, and you got to be that team player to make it work. So if anything I'm going to take from that, it's, if what may seem like a momentary advantage there, actually completely the wrong decision, and in that instance probably would have shot him in the foot in some ways. But going to the back end of the Blue Angels, so I watched the documentary recently. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. It was a really good snapshot into the life of the Blues and the culture and also the history and stuff too. And I actually found the bit where Brian Kesselring walking away, and that was his last flight, the last show. The car park sign was turned over, the name was scraped off, and he's walking back to his squadron. I actually found that quite emotional, and I was wondering what that was like for you. Was that pretty emotional, that last day, that last flight? How did it feel going out of that high impact job into whatever the world was going to throw at you next?
Yeah, that's definitely emotional, and it's hard to put into words the emotion, but in a place like that, again, another high functioning organization moving very fast, and it did in your life for a little over 2 years is very scheduled. You're looking at an itinerary every single day, and everything starts to the minute. You know exactly where you're going to be, what hotel you're staying in, and you go. In winter training, you're flying 15 times a week, and so it's a pretty intense schedule. And that when it ends like that, you're going at that full speed, and it's like jumping off a treadmill that's running fast. You kind of hit the ground, you kind of stumble a little bit. And I remember walking into the parking lot. We had this last dinner with the old team, the new team, and it was the last event of the season. And it ended, and I was walking into the parking lot with my wife, and holy cow, it's over. Like, what do we do now? Because it was just, it was really kind of it's a little bit, not slap in the face is the wrong word, but it's just shocking how quickly it stops, and, all the former team members you meet when you join the team, they say, hold on, it's going to go really fast. It'll be over before you know it. And I knew that was true. But you do everything you can to try to, you can't slow it down, but you can absorb as much as you can every day. And I try to make a point every day to look down. I remember looking down at the blue suit, and being thankful, being glad to be here, wearing that suit, and just it's almost an out of body experience daily to get to do that thing. And that's really special. Again, it's not about the person, it's about the suit. But yeah, it's a pretty intense moment, and it takes a little time to kind of get used to life again.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you get to keep that suit, or is that like the jets? It gets turned over to whoever next. So, hopefully in the right size.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, especially my practice suits, I don't think anybody wants those. Are pretty worn out. But yeah, there's one in McGuire's there in Pensacola, that steak Irish pub and restaurant. Uh, I have a couple in my closet in a box. So yeah, those are mine.
Nice. I like it. That's
Pretty
good trivia
proud.
right there. It's great trivia.
Yeah.
So, right. Well, so, you had that experience, you had those two experiences. It developed this leader. I imagine very different experiences in their own ways, but all pitched into creating ultimately a very, very strong leadership profile and a lot of great ideas and kind of understanding how to lead an organization and stuff. So then, obviously not sure what you did exactly after that, but eventually this obviously led to Raven. So I guess, how did you get involved with all of that? What was your transition out of the blues like career wise? When did you leave? And talk to me a bit about exactly what Raven is, because obviously I have a good idea of what it is from looking at all this stuff, but tell me a little bit about what it is, what it serves, how it does it, and explain it to the people listening in right now.
Yeah, so finished my tour. As you said, we hit the parking lot there after the last day, and then we transitioned into we stayed in Pensacola, and we led the Blue Angel transition team, where we transitioned from the Legacy Hornet to the Super Hornet. And basically, what we did while the team was running in parallel with the Legacy Hornets, we were accepting the new Super Hornets, working with Boeing and Navair on the Blue Angel modification to the Super Hornet, which is a little bit different from the Legacy Hornet, but it has a lot of the similar things, smoke and inverter fuel pumps and things like that, but made to fit the Super Hornet. So a lot of maintenance acceptance, making sure we had the right things in the airplane. It's a very unique situation, obviously, to have a plane like that in Pensacola, with making sure we had all the support behind the scenes to make sure that plane was ready to go. So we did all that. We flew it. We did the regression testing on the airplane, and tested out. You learn little things about the way the radar altimeter works, or there are new modifications of the plane. You try to find all those little glitches and things you didn't know about prior to handing them off to the team, because the intent is the team finishes their last show of the Legacy Hornet. They drop salute, change the signs, and then they jump in the Super Hornet for all intents and purposes and start training and get back into the next show. So there's really, when you look at the show schedule, there's not a lot of time in there to do a transition. So that's what we did for our last couple of years in the Navy and in Pensacola. And during that time, COVID happened, so that kind of put a hamper on the air show side of things for the current team, and then how we prep for the transition, and then also not necessarily a hamper, but it just added a degree of difficulty to preparation for retirement, which is what we had decided to do as a family. It was time to move on to retirement, and started interviewing, looking around, and I think a lot of us, especially pilots, or a lot of the naval aviators out there, either go to the airlines or go to corporate flying. And I was looking at that as well, but I had a friend of mine that came to this company that was a former maintenance officer of mine in VFA 113. And he asked me one day what I was doing next, and he told me about this company, and he said, "Well, if you don't mind, send a resume in." And I really never thought much about this industry, commercial air services, but I sent him a resume, and slowly but surely, I got to meet some of the members of the company, and they asked me to come join and be the COO. And that's a challenging thing. I think you talk about the emotional aspect of leaving the team. That's the same thing leaving the military. It's a challenging endeavor, I think, for anybody. I think you'd be lying to say that it was easy, because you've been a part of this culture, this machine that is the U.S. Navy for 25 years, And at one moment of time, you're going to retire, find a new job, find new schools for your kids. You're going to find a new home and move. Not to mention, there's this whole, you're trying to find yourself in, this new environment, this new, new career path. And I think that one of the great things about this industry, and there's really 5 big companies out there that do what we do with Raven that are TAC Air, Draken, Top Aces, and ATAC. And one, all great companies. I really have. It's been a great opportunity to get to know our competitors or frenemies, as it were. We're all competing for contracts, and we all want to win, but at the same time, I think maybe even to a fault, we all wear our Navy or our Air Force hat before we put on our Raven hat, because all of these guys and girls came from the fleet and the CAF, and they care about the mission. They care about the guys and girls in the cockpit out there doing the mission. They want to teach, and they see. We talked about those little things you grab from your prior experiences, whether it be a Top Gun or the Air Force Weapons School, and you can bring those to this cadre of extreme professionals in this industry. And from an Air Force or Navy perspective, you look at pilot retention, for example. That's a challenging thing. The airlines are hiring, and there's really a pilot shortage across the globe, and there's a lot of pilots leaving to go fly for the airlines, and that's all good stuff. The good thing about us is when those pilots retire after 20 years or get out after 10, they come to us in the Navy and the Marine Corps and the Air Force. And the Army, for that matter, you still get to use those pilots and all those years of experience and those graduate level understanding and all that innovation and things that you want to do and make better and teach. So we have all those people in this industry, and that's really, at the end of the day, what drove me there is that environment. A lot of people that believe in the mission. And they want to make them. That's what we've wanted to do our whole career. Whether you've been in the Blues or Top Gun or 422, you're always trying to move the bar up. You're always trying to get to the next thing and make it better, make it faster. And we get to do that here. And the great thing about our industry is we bring, again, first and foremost, great people, as I've said, but we understand the mission, and we're trying to bring effects on airplanes that you don't have to deploy with. So our airplanes don't have to be prepared for combat. So we can be creative and innovative with these experimental airplanes, like you flew in the L-39, where we can bring effects at a much lower cost on a lower cost airframe, again, that doesn't have to be fortified to go into combat, but you got great people flying them. And then you have aviators on the active side that don't have to, they have precious few hours to fly these days. And so what we can do for that is increase readiness by those pilots over there not having to fly these adversary air missions or get the negative transfer that they see from that. Not have to put hours on an F-35 or F-22 that needs to do adversary air. Not add hours to that airframe unnecessarily that doesn't have, in some cases, a long life applied to it. So it's a really fun industry. It's a challenging one for sure, but it's great to be in. And again, to your question, why did I come here? It's that innovation. It's the ability to teach, and it's the people that you see here. That's phenomenal.
I really like it. It's a fantastic mission, and from everything I've seen so far, it's a brilliant company doing stuff for a great cause. And I got to ask then, kind of rounding off here just slightly, but what are some of those most exciting developments that you're seeing on the horizon within aviation? And how do you kind of feel Raven is positioning itself to lead in this new era of aerospace innovation, basically? And I guess just kind of like looking towards the future, how's it looking for Raven and you?
Yeah, there's a lot of other great companies out there. We're a small business, which is, it's fun to be a part of. We're aspirational to grow. We want to, continue to succeed and get more airplanes, get more contracts. But at the same time, it's really fun to be a small business because we're small, we're nimble, we have one owner, and we're pretty autonomous. We can move quickly and go after contracts or try applying new technologies. And I think that's the other exciting thing with some of the newer technologies you see, or excuse me, newer companies out there, small businesses growing and finding, again, I use the word innovative a lot, but creative ways to bring solutions. So we've partnered with a lot of small companies out there, and we can bring capabilities very quickly in these airplanes. They're experimental, so we're able to test them, test these systems quickly. And so we're involved with some of these small companies, and we're applying software changes day of and flying it, and then bringing it to the operators. We're in up in Arkansas today, flying with JTACs on the ground up there. We have a targeting pod that we're using with another small company, and they just emailed us a software change. We're able to apply that to the pod, and bring a great teaching aid to those JTACs on the ground. And that's super fun. Just the speed of innovation that you see again with a lot of these again smaller technologies out there, technology companies. It's a lot of fun to be a part of.
I can see that for sure. I think this leads really nicely into the shameless plug then. So obviously you've kind of given us a big hint and a big look at exactly what it's all about there, why it's great. And we just want to see more about where to find all the stuff that you're doing now then. So if we call this the shameless plug moment, then you're more than welcome to promote all of your stuff. So everything about you. And then also, where can we find everything to do with RAVN then? So where can we keep up to date? Where can we support if we can support? And feel free to send the guys listening in today to wherever you feel like they should go and find out more, basically.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of me going on out there right now. All of me kind of goes into RAVN. I've been very fortunate to work with some nonprofits out there, both with Tailhook Association, the Tailhook Educational Foundation, as well as the Blue Angels Foundation, doing a lot of great work for both active naval aviators through the TOPGUN, through the Tailhook Association, their legacy, both their kids through the Educational Foundation, and then with the Blue Angels Foundation, working with a lot of our wounded warriors out there and helping bring care to our folks out there going through trauma or dealing with post-traumatic stress, or all the different things that come from a career in the military, which can be stressful for a lot of different reasons. So those are great organizations to be a part of, and I enjoy spending time with them. And then with RAVN Aerospace, you can check us out on ravenaero.com. RAVN, no E in the Raven. And doing a lot of fun stuff with RAVN. We're really excited about it. We're down here in Houston, Texas, at Ellington Spaceport. So a lot of growth there at Ellington in the space industry. And it's a lot of fun stuff going on around that airfield. And then, we're all over the place. So it's fun to be a part of. And again, I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Me too. This has been a massive honor. And as you guys would say, I'm super glad to be here. This was such a great episode. So Eric, thank you for joining me today for the Talk 4 podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And I'll make sure all those links and everything are in the description so people can go check it out. But yeah, thank you, man. This has been just phenomenal. What a great episode. Definitely one of my best ones, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. I love talking about this stuff. I could do it all day. So I appreciate the time, and again, honored to be invited.
I'm honored that you took the time to do this, and honored that you guys would listen to this whole thing too. This has been episode 138. If you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. If you'd like to listen in for the future ones too, make sure to hit that subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now. See you in the next one. Cheers.